which, like your 12-pound Napoleons, they were probably accurate to about, maybe 1,000 yards, if that. The rifled gun such as this could be accurate well over 1,500 yards, and they can actually fire up to 2 miles. The shells that were used, there were several different types that were fired out of these guns. Known as a 3-inch Hotchkiss shell. Now this is an original artillery shell that was recovered down in Louisiana. If you notice, the lead band on this shell has rifling marks etched in it after it was fired. What would happen was this is actually 3 pieces. You have your base, the center band, and the nose piece. When the gun's fired, it presses the bottom piece into the top half, expands this lead ring into the grooves of the rifling, and that's what gives it its spin. This particular shell is what's known as K-shot. It would be filled with small lead balls. You would explode this normally in front of the infantry troops, so the momentum of the shell would actually spray these balls into the infantry. Another type would be what's called shell. Now this particular shell here is a 3-inch Amsterdam shell. This one would either have a percussion fuse in it, which would explode on impact, or you could put a paper time fuse in it, which you could set anywhere between 1 second and 32 seconds. Whatever you cut that length of fuse at, put it in the gun, or put it in the end of the shell. When the gun was fired, the blast from the charge would come around the shell, ignite this fuse, and that's what would set the main charge off. This shell would probably explode into about maybe 10 pieces, and that's it. Another type that was used was what's called solid shot. Now solid shot would not explode. It would be used against buildings, breastworks. If they ran out of everything else, they could actually skip it across the ground at the infantry troops and possibly take out about 20 to 30 men with one shot. Close range artillery. You would use what's called canister. And basically all it was a tin can filled with steel balls about this size. They would use it under 200 yards against infantry troops. It would actually explode inside the gun. It would be packed with these balls and sawdust. That's it. There's no powder charge in it. It would explode inside the tube, and when it exited the muzzle, it would be like a giant shotgun. I don't know if any of you saw the movie Gettysburg, but they used this quite a bit on the 3rd day for Pickett's charge. There was one incident during the Battle of Gettysburg where one of the batteries, Cowan's battery, had 30 men in front, and he had his gun loaded with 2 of these canisters. And when the gun was fired and the smoke cleared, there wasn't one man standing in front of that gun. They were all wiped out. So they were pretty devastating. That's where your smoothbores came in a lot. The smoothbores had bigger charges of canister, and that's why the Confederates liked them so much. The Union mostly stuck with the rifled gun. You guys want to post? You have all your implements and primers? Yeah. One of the weapons, while they're setting up, one of the weapons that were used by the artillery was the 1858 Remington revolver. Now these things, once you fire your 6 shots out of these, you might as well throw them away. Because if you're in a battle situation, you can't sit there and load all 6 cylinders without being killed. What you have to do to load one, you have to reach back, grab a cartridge, which is basically, as they showed you with the other weapons demonstration, you needed 4 teeth in the Army to serve, and they had to meet, because if you couldn't tear these cartridges off, you couldn't fight. A lot of guys used to knock their teeth out with hammers, so they wouldn't have to go in. Well, you bite the top off, dump the powder in. Now what you'd normally do is you'd have to bite this again, and the ball would be down at the base of this cartridge. So you'd have to bite it again and put the ball in, but being we aren't shooting ball today, you put a wad in, you have to rotate it underneath the rammer, pack everything down in. Now you would have to go through this 6 times. And like I said, you certainly wouldn't want to do that if you were being attacked. Then the hard part is you have to get one of these small percussion caps. Try to put it on the nipple of the revolver. Which, as you can see, I'd probably be overrun by fire. That's all you have to do. Well, like I said, once you fired those 6 shots, you might as well throw it away. This was, the saber was a little more useful to the artilleryman than the revolver was. This thing he could use and use over and over again and not have to worry about anything. This piece right here is called a saber knot. You would slip this on your hand, on your wrist, and tighten it down. That way, if you were fighting on horseback and swung and it got knocked out of your hand, you couldn't drop it. Of course, one thing you wouldn't want to do is run somebody through with it, because as their horse is going by, your arm's going with them, so it's not a smart idea. These were mainly meant for slashing. These weren't meant for sticking anybody. Usually the shoulder area or the head area is where these were used. Another weapon that some of the artillery carried was the Enfield musketoon. Now this is basically the same thing as the Springfield muskets, which you just saw a few minutes ago. They fired a 58 caliber mini ball, much like this one right here. And that's why there were so many amputations during the Civil War. The bullets that we use today are a little more pointed, streamlined, and they move an average of about 3,000 feet per second. These mini balls are so heavy, they only move about 540 feet per second when you fire them. So the bullets today, when they go in and hit your bone, they're moving so fast, when they hit the bone, they just glance off. And there's no problem. But these things, being they're traveling so slow, when they hit the bone, they take it out. And they had no way of repairing bone back then, so the only thing they could do was get the saw out and cut your arm or your leg off wherever you were hit. If you were gut shot, you were dead automatically, because they had no way of repairing it. But it's pretty much loaded the same way. But these would be all secondary weapons. The main job of the artillerist is the main gun. Most of the time, he won't even have these weapons on the gun with him. One reason being that if he had those other weapons, he might be more likely to use the revolver or the musket rather than the gun itself. Gun crew to man one of these guns. Number one man is holding what's known as a rammer and sponge. His job is to ram the charge into the barrel, and also to wet sponge the tube to put out any embers that might be burning in there from the last shot. Number two man. Number two man is holding what's called a worm. That's used to go into the tube and twist it and pulls out any debris that might be left in the barrel after the last shot. And he's also in charge of dry sponging the tube if needed. Number three man. Number three man probably has the most crucial job on the gun. As you see in his left hand, he has what's called a thumb stall. Now that is to put over the vent hole, which is located right here, and that's to cut off any air from going into the barrel of the gun. If you fire a shot and there's powder or part of the powder bag burning in there yet, and you go to shove the next round in there, somebody's going to lose an arm up front when the charge is rammed. So the object is to cut the air circulation off into the tube and snuff out any embers that are burning in there. If there still is any left, the number one man with the wet sponge usually takes care of that. Also, he's in charge. He has a vent pick and a gimlet. The vent pick is used to poke a hole in the powder bag to allow the friction primer to blast into it a little more cleanly. And also the gimlet, which is used to extract any friction primers that might have been stuck in the tube. Number four man. Number four man is holding what's called a lanyard, and his job is to fire the gun. This right here is the friction primer that sets off the main powder charge. The lanyard has an S-hook on the end of it. It's attached to this ring. When that ring is pulled, it creates a friction in this tube, which sets off the powder charge that's in this. Number five man would be also called powder monkey. He would be back here in this position. He would do nothing more than to run the powder from the limber chest to the number two man so he could put it into the barrel. There would be a number 7 or 6 and 7 man back on the limber chest. The number 6 man would be in charge of cutting the fuses to the certain length that the gunner would call for, and hand the shells to the number 5 man. Number 7 man, his job is basically just to open up the limber chest and close it when it's needed to be done. There was also a number 8 man who was in charge of just watching over the limber chest to make sure that everything was done properly. Myself in this position is what's called a gunner. I would be in charge of giving all the commands on the gun, plus I would be in charge of calling what shell I might want. If I want a case shot at 1,500 yards, I yell that back to the man in the number 6 position. He would cut the fuse and we're going to load by detail so you get an idea of everybody's job. Gun number 1, load by detail. Clean vent. He goes in, makes sure that there's no debris in the vent. Stop vent. He cuts off the air supply. Worm. Sponge. Dance charge. Load. Ram. Now the gunner at this point, after he taps the barrel, would come up, would would come up and sight the piece. The number 3 man would move back. If I want this gun moved, all I have to do is tap this side and he moves it that way, or tap this side and he moves it the other way. When I have everything set, I give the clear signal, he moves back. Pick and prime. Now he's poking a hole in the powder bag, inserting the friction primer into the vent hole. Now if you notice, the number 1 man has the rammer on the hub. That's to tell me, or if there's usually 6 guns in an artillery battery. If I was the officer of this battery, I'd know which guns are loaded by the rammers on the hubs. Gun number 1, prepare to fire. Fire. Now that's a little slow. They certainly didn't do that during the Civil War. The command that was given back then would just be, gun number 1, load. Gun number 1, ready. Gun number 1, prepare to fire. Fire. Now they could probably get about 3 to 4 shots off a minute during the Civil War with one of these guns. During the Battle of Gettysburg, a lot of the guns, you didn't even have to use those friction primers. The guns were so hot, the powder bags that they used back then were cold, so it didn't take much to ignite. All that the number 3 man had to do was hold his thumb on the vent like he's doing right now. They shoved the powder bag down in there. As soon as he took his thumb off, the air would rush down into the tube to ignite the powder bag, and the round would go off. But they were dangerous back then. You could usually tell a man's position on the gun by what arm or thumb he's lost. So what we're going to do for you right now, is there any questions on this? Yes?
I noticed.
During the Battle of Pickett's Charge, or the opening of the battle, the Confederates had somewhere around 130 cannon lined up, and they all fired at one time to open up the Battle of Pickett's Charge, and they claimed that they heard it as far away as Pittsburgh when they fired these things. So they are quite loud, especially when you have some restriction in there, such as a shell.